Hello beautiful people and welcome to the August nature vlog. This month I've been on a couple of really gorgeous hikes, and the first one was this one up Berwick Law. It was a pretty breezy day and I watched as this bumblebee tried to get some nectar from some achillea. But the breeze definitely had its benefits as it made the tall grass make amazing sounds. It sounded just like the sea. Berwick Law is a volcanic plug which sits next to the East Lothian town of North Berwick. The summit is home to a ruin of a stone watch house which was built during the Napoleonic War, replica whale jawbones and a World War II lookout. Since 2013, the grasses on the law are grazed by a group of Exmoor ponies, which promotes wildflowers to grow such as the achillea that the bee was enjoying earlier. Conservation grazing had occurred on Berwick Law in the past but was stopped on the law for about 10 years, which allowed gorse and rank grasses to expand over the habitat. The mix of alkaline, volcanic and acidic rock, which is scarce in Scotland, means that the bare rock on the law is a special home to lichens and mosses, one species of which is only found in a few locations in the country, so it's extra important that the ponies are employed to keep the vegetation at bay. After my friend and I had headed back down Berwick Law, we headed to Drift, which is a coastside coffee house right on the edge of the cliffs with the most amazing views looking out over Bass Rock, and you can also see Berwick Law and Tantellen Castle as well. It's just really cool there. I can highly recommend the spiced apple cake, and everyone serving us was lovely, and I would definitely go back. And the views out over, there's like a little beach as well. I don't think people can access it, but you can look down over this beautiful beach. It's just a really special place. It's made of 6 shipping containers, and if you Google the place online, you can see a little YouTube video from one of the owners explaining a little bit about how they created it and what their aims are for it. It's located 2 miles east of North Berwick and it's on a bus route, which is very handy. We then headed to West Bay in North Berwick and had to do the mandatory toe dip into the sea. To begin the second adventure I had this month, I had to cross the Upper Clyde by ferry from McInroy's Point in Gourock to Hunter's Quay near Dunoon. We travelled on a ferry called the Sound of Soye, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, and the crossing took about 20 minutes and the views were really gorgeous. This trip was actually for my husband's birthday, and I had seen a place called Puck's Glen on someone's Instagram reels, and it looked incredible, and I just thought it would make for a really nice trip because from Edinburgh it's not too far to go for a nice weekend. So that's why we were here, and I'm pleased to say he really enjoyed it. The bit we actually are going up now isn't actually the main Puck's Glen section. You can actually do a really nice little circular loop, and this is the other side of the circle, as it were, going up on the right hand side. And we actually end up doing Puck's Glen at the end of the day, because what happens is we went along this right hand side route to the top, and then we cut across the top of the trees, and then we went down into the forest beyond Puck's Glen, and at the bottom of that path pretty much was Benmore Botanical Gardens, and they are part of the same group that has the Edinburgh Botanical Gardens in it. And it's got loads of amazing features, which I'll talk about when we get there. But it made for a really nice day out, because after you finish there, you can then walk along. There's a path that runs parallel to the road. The road's quite far away, but it's basically along the bottom of the hillside. So we walked along there, and then we went left up Puck's Glen. And it actually worked out quite nicely timing-wise, because the weather was really, really mixed. It was sunny when we started the walk, and then it really tipped it down. And then by the time we got to Puck's Glen, the sun had started to come out again. So the Glen was really, really like wet. There was loads of dripping water like falling down the sides. The waterfalls are really abundant, but then the sun was glistening on everything, so it made it look so stunning. So I really hope you stick with me to the end of this video, but in the meantime there is loads of beauty to be found, so let's keep walking. Here we are entering Benmore Botanic Garden, which is a gorgeous mountainside garden of 120 acres, surrounded by the dramatic scenery of Argyll, which is home, along with the West Highlands, to Scotland's Atlantic rainforest. These areas have the perfect conditions for more than 500 species of lichens, ferns and mosses. Okay, so they've given us a little moss trail kind of guide, and we've got a little magnifying glass so we can kind of see all the moss up close, and then they've given us moss trail guide, tells you all about the different mosses, and then a lichen safari so you can learn all about the different lichen. As you can see from this illustration, tons of creatures call the Scottish rainforest their home, and one of those is the red squirrel, and we are actually in a red squirrel hideout. Unfortunately, we didn't see a red squirrel at this moment in time, but I am so chuffed to report that later, actually it was after we left the gardens, technically left the gardens, and we're in the cafe shop reception area, there is a tree with a bird feeder, and a red squirrel came and tried to get some of the bird food, but there was a dog there with some people that were having some food that barked, and the red squirrel ran off. It's the first time I've ever seen a red squirrel. I can't think of another time I've ever seen one in Britain. The whole time I've lived here, which is my whole life, I've never seen one, and I can't actually believe I've seen one in real life. It was brilliant. And yeah, so unfortunately I didn't managed to film it. It happened so quickly, but I can show you the spot where I did see it, because I did film some of the birds eating the bird food, so that comes a bit later. Okay, so here I am getting a bit excited about the moss finding, and I think I've found the moss straight in front of us, but actually it's not. If I'd read it properly, I would have realised that this type of moss grows on the trees within the garden, and actually I do find it later, so I'll point that out when I do actually film a bit of it later. The moss in the picture and the moss on the ground do look really similar, but I'm pretty sure they are actually different, because the one on the ground just seemed to grow on the ground, and the one that's in the picture I think only grows on trees. But I'll read what it says for you in case you didn't get it in the shot. But it talks about Scotland's rainforest, and it says, here in Argyll there are over 800 kinds of bryophytes, about 4% of all known species. Not so surprising when you consider that rain falls on more than 240 days here each year. High humidity allows broom fork moss to grow on trees here. The marker will help you find it on a conifer branch. I spotted a deer within the Botanic Gardens. Can you see it quite far in the distance? It's just running away. We also spotted one after we'd come up the top of the right-hand side of Puck's Glen, and it was really cool. It was a really gorgeous russet colour. So we spotted 2 deers, 1 squirrel, and I'm trying to think if we spotted anything else really cool, but I think they were the main wildlife spots of the day, but very exciting indeed. The viewpoint behind the memorial shelter looks right over to Holy Loch, which is the area where we got the ferry coming in from. And after this, we went to a section of the garden which is called the Benmore Chilean Hillside. It's a 14-acre area dedicated to plants which are typical of the Chilean rainforest. There's also a Chilean shelter there as well, which we took refuge in because it started to tip it down. This is another Chilean shelter called the Condor, and there are actually 4 world planting areas within the garden. Alongside the Chilean area is a Bhutanese area, which you'll see a little bit of next with a stone pillar and the shelter in the background. And then there is a Japanese area and also a Tasmanian area. Here we've entered the Tasmanian part of the garden, and I just absolutely loved this plant. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. It's called Melaleuca virens, and it's commonly known as lime bottlebrush, and it's a plant in the myrtle family and is perfectly hardy in the UK. I just loved how the fruit, you can see the seeds, they kind of sit halfway along the branches. I just thought it was very unusual, and it really caught my eye. Here we're approaching the Benmore Fernery, which was a highlight of the walk around the garden. So I'll read what the board says as we walk through it. So the building was commissioned at the height of the Victorian craze for ferns and ferneries when James Duncan was the owner of the Benmore estate. The fernery has stood in this uniquely dramatic setting since circa 1870. By the early years of the 20th century, its heyday had passed and it had fallen into a state of disrepair. From 1928, when the policies of Benmore House became the younger Botanic Garden, the first outstation of the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh, it was regarded as a ruin and visitors were excluded for their own safety. Successive curators and members of the younger Benmore Trust have always dreamed of resurrecting the fernery, and despite the ravages of time and encroaching vegetation, ensured that the soaring gable walls were stabilised. Now, a century after this fascinating structure faded into history, it has been brought back to life. Despite the lack of detailed original plans, the restoration faithfully evokes all the character of a remarkable Victorian fernery, whilst exploiting 21st century technology in its elegant re-roofing. Rising through 3 levels, it includes all the classic features with winding stairs, a grotto with a pool, and an elevated viewing platform. Overall, it is 15 metres long, 9 metres wide, and its south gable soars to a height of 11 metres. Most significantly, a substantial portion of its eastern wall compromises the natural mica schist rock that outcrops so spectacularly here in Glen. Here is a fallen tree, and just look at that life that's growing from it. It's amazing. So here is where I think I've correctly identified the broom fork moss, which I thought I'd found earlier but hadn't. I do a close-up in a minute, so you'll be able to see it on the trees, but just look at these trees. Aren't they absolutely magnificent? Just the way all the lichen and the moss is just dripping off them. It's just so atmospheric. It looks very fairy tale-esque. This is Benmore's famous giant redwood avenue. Unfortunately, it was closed when we visited as the garden are carrying out work to revitalise the soil that nurtures the tree's roots. The soil had become compacted, which led to waterlogging and less nutrients for the tree's roots. This is the cafe, shop and reception area of the garden, and this is the spot where I saw the red squirrel. Here we are going up Puck's Glen. I'll read a section from the tourist information board at the car park there because it's really interesting. So it says, down the rushy glen. Discover something magical in this deep woodland gorge. The trail accompanies a lively highland burn as it plunges down a cascade of enchanting waterfalls. The Glen is named after Puck, a mischievous spirit who haunts many legends and appears in William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. But perhaps you should look out for the poker ban, Argyle's answer to Puck, a spirit that appears as a rolling ball of wool tripping people up. Here's an excerpt from The Fairies by William Allingham, an Irish poet in 1850. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. The natural and the supernatural. James Duncan, Laird of Benmore, had the gorge enhanced at considerable expense in the 1870s. He wanted to evoke a wild, mystical realm to charm his visitors. The Glen's cool, perpetually damp depths provide the ideal habitat for lush mosses and ferns. Puck's Glen Gorge Trail is a magical trail that winds along a Victorian walkway up the dramatic rocky gorge that is said to be home to mischievous spirits, past several waterfalls beneath the towering Douglas firs. The trail is strenuous and takes around an hour and covers 1¾ miles. It's firm but uneven gravel paths with some rough, rocky and narrow sections, several steep slopes and long flights of rough steps. It includes numerous bridges and some sections that are wet after rain. Let's talk a little bit about the wider context of where Puck's Glen sits. So it's in Argyll Forest Park, which is in Cowell, a rugged peninsula in Argyll. The Tourist Information Board says that this beautiful tree-cloaked corner of Scotland was opened up to visitors as Britain's first forest park in 1935. Today you can explore Cowell's most inspiring woodland on a network of well-managed trails. The forests produce timber for building, paper and pulp. Forestry Commission Scotland also works to conserve native plants and animals. In around 1875, Duncan Curry wrote, in praise of Cowell, "My blessing on Cowell of the beautiful grand mountains, of the narrow twisting glens and of the fields, of the hillocks, of the peaks, of the creeks, of the streams, where the hillsides are clothed in dark blue." Meet the locals. Tread carefully and quietly, you might encounter some iconic Scottish wildlife. Red squirrels are common, otters feed at the lochside, and red and roe deer shelter among the trees. An ideal home. You will certainly encounter some of Britain's biggest trees in Cowell. The cool, moist conditions and the long summer days are ideal for conifers. I hope you enjoyed our walks up Berwick Law and around Puck's Glen and Benmore Botanic Garden. I just am going to end with a little clip of rubbish that I picked up after Puck's Glen alongside the road. Hopefully it's going to stop it from blowing into that incredible beauty spot. So fingers crossed. I hope you all have an incredible rest of the summer and are able to get out and see some of our amazing British wildlife.